Okay, I think we'll get started now, as we've got, looks like most people are in the room that had said they were coming. So welcome everybody. My name is Sue Riddlestone. I'm your moderator today, and I'm going to start with some housekeeping and a little bit of an overview for the forthcoming hour. So we've got an expert panel, and actually we've got an expert audience today. So although it's very much a panel discussion, we really want your input, and what we're looking at is how we can demystify changes to government policy and deliver sustainable IT for the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Social Value Act. And this is the first webinar of an interactive series where we're looking to engage with and get feedback from and inform each other, and inform the market. So we're really interested, as I say, this is very interactive in terms of we want you to go in on the chat, tell us what you think, comment, ask questions. We want to hear from you, what resonates with you, and then the panel will, during the session, the panel will discuss your questions, and Matt, who's marketing manager from Circular Computing, will aim to sort of condense that into some themes to make it a bit easier for us panellists. It would be chaos if we had sort of a big question and answer, so we'll try to do justice to what you say, what you've asked in a group setting, but we're not going to have sort of individual Q&A. So all of what you comment on will come through into future themes, perhaps for follow-on events. So we do hope you'll come back to the next event too, if you find this one useful. And there will be an in-session poll and further follow-up surveys. So we want to explore what you want to talk about in the future. So please do take the time, whether it's positive or negative, to give some feedback. And usual housekeeping thing, just to say that as in many cases, this webinar will be recorded and it will be sent to anyone who registered within 24 hours after the show. So please do bear that in mind. So on to who are we all here today. So we've got a great expert panel. We've got Adam Turner from Defra, who's going to give us an insight into the government view. Welcome, Adam. We've got David Shields, who has a wealth of experience in public procurement and delivering social value, and Steve Haskew from Circular Computing, who are enabling so many of us to procure more sustainable IT. And just to introduce myself briefly, I'm Chief Executive and co-founder of Bioregional, which is a purpose-led social enterprise with a mission to enable sustainable living where we all live well within the natural limits of our planet. And we call that One Planet Living, which we also have made a framework which anyone can use. And I guess what I'm bringing today is some experience in sustainable business and procurement within that, and also an ICT project that we have worked on, which is how I came across Steve and this sector. So we've got 25 years of real life initiatives which enable sustainable living through sustainable products, working with clients and partners like B&Q and Nando's, and in the built environment. So I'm speaking here from Bedstead, which is a sort of world famous eco-village, which was a project we initiated. And we worked on projects like the London 2012 Olympics, and it was fascinating to see how procurement was so important as part of that, both in terms of how it changed things like McDonald's starting to procure sustainable MSC fish across the whole of their portfolio, starting with the Olympics, and also sustainable wood, getting the right things into the subcontracts of the different tiers of contractors. And that was a wonderful project to work on for us. But probably most relevant to today, we use these practical examples to change policy and practice to make more impact, and we have had a formal role working to secure the Sustainable Development Goals, and a formal role as the NGO global focal point for Goal 12, Sustainable Consumption and Production. And as part of that, we've been working with people like the Dutch government in terms of how could we have a sort of procurement-led approach to scale up known solutions for sustainable ICT using the power of procurement and working with the manufacturers. So as I say, that's how I came across Steve and circular computing, and looking forward to bringing that perspective into the discussion, but I'll try to be a good moderator. So over to our first speaker, who is Adam Turner from Her Majesty's Government, and is the Sustainable Technology Lead. And Adam is leading the change in policy at Defra, and he's responsible for driving the intergovernmental green IT agenda. So we really want to hear what you've got to say, Adam. Over to you.
Thank you, Sue. A delay on this one as well. Are we okay? I think we're okay. Hi everyone. Yeah, Adam Turner. I work for Defra. I chair a group called the STAR, which is Sustainable Technology Advice and Reporting. And that's a pan-government group. So that's central government departments each have a rep on the group. And what we do is deliver the cross-government strategy and the reporting that goes with that. Policy-wise, it's a complicated beast across government, as I'm sure you're all aware, in terms of ownership. So Sue was just talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. They're owned by DFID. Then you look at energy efficiency, that's owned by BEIS, that was DEC. You look at circular economy, that's owned by Defra. And you look at any things like modern slavery, that's owned by Home Office. So it's a bit of a beast. Green ICT is something we've been doing for over 10 years, and the predecessor to the group that I chair, the STAR, was known as the Green IT Delivery Unit. So if you look on gov.uk, you'll find the previous versions of those strategies. It was all about green IT originally. It was all about how we can get government to procure greener, in inverted commas, tech, but that was all about energy efficiency. That was all about virtualizing our servers, moving to the cloud, getting rid of the government desktop estate and moving towards laptops and more efficient devices. When I took chairmanship of the group, I changed the name from green to sustainable, hence the name changed to the STAR, and I changed the scope of the work from being just about estates to being about those services that we consume. So the government footprint, because we're setting the requirements right across the public sector, we're defining what it is that we want to use, and that we're offshoring that carbon footprint to these suppliers, whether those are SMEs, and by that I mean small, medium enterprises, not subject matter experts, but yeah, we're offshoring that responsibility. The problem then is that those massive conglomerate companies, the smaller ones are generally great. The larger ones are less keen to share this kind of carbon footprint data. So we're working with the likes of Amazon and Google and Microsoft and others to try and get service-specific carbon footprint. The new strategy I'm writing at the moment, and everyone to look out for September the 10th as the publication date for the new strategy. That will be on gov.uk. I'm fingers crossed that will happen. But what I've done there is moved to a more embedded and embodied carbon view of our carbon footprint. So it's no good just having this green view. It's no good for me that we're just talking about energy efficiency and, you know, you buy your green energy up front and that's good enough. This picture has to be about the embodied carbon that's in the servers and in the devices that we're using. And the only way we can do that is to start setting targets across government and the public sector to make that happen. I won't waffle on about this too much. I'm sure it will come out in the conversation. But fair to say, I'm trying to move things in the right direction and trying to get everyone to buy into how this happens. It is vital for me that we have this whole life carbon view. Otherwise, we're not going to meet net zero ambitions. We're not going to meet those SDGs. And it's a complicated picture, but we're moving in the right direction. I think that's all I want to say for the moment, Sue. You're on silent there, Sue.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Back in the room.
Great, thank you. Yes, so now we're going to hear from David Shields, who is the co-founder of Value Match and non-executive director of Social Value UK. So I'm just going to introduce a little bit about what he does, and then as Adam said, thank you for the introduction, Adam, you know, then you understand the perspective of each of the panel members, and that will help you to understand where they're all coming from. So David is the former Managing Director of Crown Commercial Services, a very influential body, and has extensive expertise in providing social value within public procurement. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Sue. I'm just going to share my screen and just do a very quick introduction. Hopefully everyone can see that. So for those people who don't know me, I've worked in the public sector for quite some time, but left in, and that is a picture of me in a bowler hat leaving the civil service in 2013. I worked in Office of Government Commerce and was talking about, we were also looking at sustainable products at scale. I left government and I've worked in a number of different places, one of which was in US federal government, who I think are less further developed in the sense of sustainability, but are further ahead in areas of addressing inequality and equality of opportunity for minority groups. Work programs there, and we were working closely, again, embedding those processes into category plans, sourcing activity and certain KPIs. I had the pleasure of seeing the whole process of the current administration from the election process, and that was an interesting process to observe as an external person into the US government. Various consulting activity, and as Sue mentioned, I'm a non-exec Director of Social Value UK, and as part of that role we have implemented something called Contract for Change, which is a program, completely voluntary program, bringing together social value practitioners, environmental practitioners, procurement, private, public and social enterprises to establish how do we more effectively embed social value, climate into procurement and through the supply base, and can we share best practices. One of the observations I have when I came back into the UK was that there was a lack of leadership and just a lack of sharing best practice in this area, and there are best practices out there, but they're not readily available. And then just very quickly about Value Match, which is the company and the concept that we've recently launched. First of all, most of the people who work with me and for me are public service, but I've got public and private expertise, but we're first and foremost, public servants and sort of believe in public services and ethos. But what we didn't see enough of was purpose, focus and value-driven organisations. And fundamentally, ourselves as a company and as the individuals in our company feel if we're going to seriously address the huge social and economic issues we face and impact the environment, that has to be the focus and purpose of organisations. And what we've done is we started to build some maturity models. We're trying to codify how organisations can embed purpose and values in the way they operate, the way they service, and who they want to partner with, and who they want to use in their supply base, so we can have a much bigger positive impact. And then the last point really is, most people on the phone will probably know, in a normal year, public sector procurement is 14% of GDP. So we see procurement as a lever for change and an accelerator for change if it's used in the right way. And certainly if you enhance that with the power of private sector companies who also perhaps should put some conditionality on who they work with and why they work with those suppliers, we overall feel we can have a hugely positive impact. And obviously procurement is our area of expertise, hence we focus on that. That's just a little bit of background about me and the work we've been doing at Value Match.
Thanks very much, David. Fascinating that you're also involved in the US and that they're further ahead on these issues. They really...
On some of those issues.
Yeah. So finally, our third or fourth panel member is Steve Haskew, who is the Strategic Sustainability Objective for the Public Sector of Circular Computing. And Steve is really at the forefront of sustainable IT. He's a member of the British Standards 8887 Standard Committee for Remanufacturing, whose mission is to change the way the world buys IT, which is amazing. Can't wait to hear from you, Steve.
Yes, my screen. I think you have a little bit of feedback on your speakers too, just as a bit of housekeeping. But as an aside, let me just share my screen with everybody. Hi everybody, I'm Steve Haskew from Circular Computing. We have the pleasure of working with some amazing people who are thought leaders in their piece, and thank you to Sue, David, and Adam for allowing us to have a bit of their day today. So I'm really grateful there. Just a quick snapshot onto who Circular Computing is. We're a 25-year-old business. We specialised in the movement and resale of unwanted and redundant IT, and until recently, redundancy has been something just as a byproduct of waste. So it's keeping e-waste out of the waste stream, if you like, and we specialise in that. In 2014, we recognised as a business that, in terms of laptop technology at least, that thin was as thin and as fast enough as it needed to be, and the job of the phone or the tablet or the laptop in our case was just to be able to procure the software coming out of the cloud in an efficient way. So we set up a business within our own business called Circular Computing, where we have a remanufacturing facility, and we spent the next 4 or 5 years really kind of understanding the technology, the products, and how to remanufacture to a standard upon which buyers of large quantities of IT can make a strategy, can feel confident that they're not buying somebody's version of a grade B or C. And so this falls under an ISO standard called 8887, which I've helped formulate, and it sort of helps the buyer define what is remanufactured and what is refurbished, and that's important if they're able to make a quality buying decision. We're able to fulfill supply by a 25-year network of purchasing around the world. So the difficulty in supplying product that isn't brand new is that you don't put a million bits into the sausage machine and then a million bits come out at the other end. What you have to be able to do is you have to be able to buy the already finished item in a quantity that is able to then fit a buying strategy, and you can't have one without the other. And within that, we've built a company with purpose. And so let me just have a quick demonstration as to what that looks like. So as a business, we're at the centre of the circular economy. The circular economy is a regenerative economy. It doesn't seek to take, make, use and dispose of assets, which is a very humanistic thing. Ironically, and by circumstance more than anything else, the World Overshoot Day is actually this Saturday. And what that represents is the date at which in the year, the calendar year, humans have exhausted the world's resources for that year. It is deemed that by 2030 we will need two planet Earths to fulfill the demand of the human race, but more likely that's going to look like 4 if we consume at the rate that we are seen to be. As I said, we're able to provide consistent quality and most importantly volume to the public sector. We have significant economic benefit to our clients. So we have one client recently who bought 1,000 machines from us, and they saved about £250,000. Now, whether or not they chose to put that saving to good use or not, that's down to their own internal policy. But there was a saving. All of our products are carbon neutral. So going back to Adam's theme of taking the embodied value of carbon. So we look at the production end, the logistics and the disposal end when we look at carbon. All of our activities are audited annually, and we're verified carbon neutral as an organisation. which essentially means that we are targeted on a science base to reduce our operational output. But where there is leakage in carbon, and sometimes it's inevitable because there are things outside of our control, we look to offset those by investments into renewable energy sources. And the big thing that we set off on day one was how do we help our clients when they look to buy a circular computing laptop in offsetting some of the carbon that they might emit if they don't buy renewable energies in the use phase of the circular computer. So we plant 5 trees for every laptop we sell. And typically, if you look at, say, the local gov sector, where you've got on average 5,000 laptops in the field, if you like, that would equate to a roughly 25 acres of trees, which in itself is an undertaking and provides legacy for the executive and demonstrates commitment to them and their stakeholders when they look to put right their commitments to the climate emergency. We wrap all of these things up in a single brand called Circular Computing. And lastly, we're a Generation Now business. So working in the public sector, I get the feeling that there is a change coming. We've spent the last 25 years trying to figure out how we can manage and offer our little bit to the client. We're a client-side business. We believe we have solutions that will fit the public sector. It's just a case for the public sector to reach out. And if we can't fit and help our client, we'll be the first to say. But generally, 99 times out of 100, there is a fit. So that is me.
Thanks very much, Steve. Wish every manufacturer or remanufacturer was like you, and there are more remanufacturers. I noticed Mervyn Jones is in the audience, and that's definitely something. He was involved in the project where we're working on the SDGs with the Dutch government, so we've got some great experts asking some great questions. Keep them coming in. So now we're going to have maybe about 17 minutes, just running a few minutes behind time, panel discussion. And Steve, you touched on it, but I think it would be really good if we could just get a handle around, well, what does unsustainable IT mean? So especially Steve and Adam, if you could share your thinking on that for us all, and then we know what is it we're trying to address here.
You want to have a go at that, Adam?
For me, there are some known facts, right, with IT. We know that data is growing exponentially. We know that IT waste is a massive waste stream. We know that it's the largest waste stream in terms of hazardous waste globally. We know that the value that's wrapped up in ICT waste is equivalent of a decent sized country in terms of GDP. We know that we are using more of this stuff as IT, and as Steve touched on, the resources for this are not endless. We are mining stuff out of the ground. It's not going to be there forever. So this is just basic economics, basic sustainability in terms of that broad sense of the word. When I was in MOD, I was constantly having problems with the term sustainability, because everyone in MOD thinks of it in terms of sustaining operations. But that is really what we're talking about here. We're talking about being able to keep using tech. If we carry on the way that we're going, in a matter of a couple of decades, we're just not going to be able to keep that going. And all these great digital visions of AI and IoT and blockchain and all the rest of it under the banner of the fourth industrial revolution, 4IR, are just not going to be possible. So IT is in itself, I suppose, unsustainable under the current linear model. It just cannot continue like this. Steve.
Yes, Steve.
I think ultimately that's a really good summary of what unsustainability looks like within IT. So if we don't deal with the pressures of today as a group, and I'll just put this in. I went for a run today, and I ran past some murmurings of starlings, big swarms of starlings, and it made me think about this session today, is that if you try and look at one, it's really difficult. As a group, as a bigger group, so it becomes a beautiful thing. And the thing about sustainability is that once you get it, and you realise there has to be change, and you're committed to change, then change happens. It just naturally does. But it requires everyone to go, I can't wait till 2025 or 2030. There are going to be sprints along the way, but ultimately you have to be committed today to wanting the change. If you're going to wait till tomorrow to do that, and sounds a horrible thing to say, you're probably the wrong person for the job, because you're denying the future generation a chance of digitalisation, that the digital exclusion will happen.
So action is needed urgently and immediately.
Yeah.
As Greta Thunberg would say, we've got to act like the house is on fire and treat this as an urgent situation.
Yeah.
And what do you think is stopping us from adopting more sustainable IT procurement? What gets in the way?
Interestingly, there's a poll on the side that everybody hasn't got involved. They can jump into the poll and sort of answer the question. I think from a supply and from the industry side of life, there's like a super tanker effect, particularly in the public sector. It's we're a speedboat and we're able to change direction quite quickly and swiftly and make decisions on the hoof. When you have a big organisation, and the public sector represents 35% of all IT spend, so it's not going to make snap decisions. Yet, for it to change direction, once it starts moving, inevitably it will get there. But it can't change immediately. So I think from a buyer's point of view, what's stopping them buying sustainable IT most probably is the education piece. They don't know maybe what it is, or they don't know that it exists. And it's a new thing for them to understand, which is why sort of ISO and BS 8887 is an important part of the puzzle, because it enables them to, from a quality point of view at least, make a decision based on somebody's verification of quality.
And looking at the poll there, what seems to be coming out most strongly is lack of clear definitions about what's sustainable. Do you think that BS 8887 process or ISO processes can help you arrive at that? What more can we do to help everyone in the room today?
Shall I go? Yeah, I agree with what we're talking about. There's assumptions are important to bring into this as well. So for years, greener by default is a term that I've come across over and over again, that this assumption that by buying new tech, by moving to the cloud, we're getting greener. The reality behind that is we're not turning off our legacy kit across the public sector. That stuff continues to run, and we are not controlling our end-of-life assets. So there's the user awareness bit is absolutely key, and there's also a lack of clear definition around policy, which is where I think David comes in with the social value bit, because this is a huge game changer. When this is launched next year by the Cabinet Office, social value will mean, in terms of procurement, 10% of your public procurement has to include social value. I've spoken with the social value team, and sustainable ICT can be included within that and as an add-on. So for departments like mine, for Defra, under our last ICT contracts, we included 8% of our public procurement weighting towards sustainable ICT. So you're looking there, 18% of your criteria for who you're doing business with to be set at that level by combining these factors. Feel like I should hand across to David.
So that should really make a change, and everybody here today needs to get up to speed with that. Is that what you'll be sharing on September the 10th? And it would be really great to hear from David on that.
Yeah. So I might just add to the debate here, because I think it's broader than IT as well. So fundamentally, if you're changing the way certainly the public sector works, but also this is, without the legislation piece, is equally true for the private sector. You need to look at this as a system change. So that's first and foremost. This is legislation, policy, guidance, operating practices, and then how you measure, prove, and evidence sustainability. And you need to use all of the levers available to drive that change. And that's the same as if you're in a private sector organisation. Obviously, without the legislation piece, you need to embed the way you operate and get clear alignment across all functions. So this is not just procurement, it's IT, it's operations. Everyone needs to be aligned to what the focus and purpose is. And I think at the moment, certainly, some of the best practices from private sector are moving further ahead because of some of the dynamics in the marketplace. So that's going to be critical to shift and change attitude, and also then create demand and capacity in the marketplace. Because quite frankly now, even if government wanted to buy every single piece of equipment in a manufactured manner, it's been created to make it easily disassembled and reused, there isn't enough capacity in the marketplace to fulfill that requirement. So it's a combination of planning and then creating that capacity to drive the change.
So it's what you're saying is, so I keep trying to make sure I'm not giving feedback each time. So what you're saying is it's a much broader discussion than just procurement, and it needs to be part of a more core strategy for the local government or the national government. Do you think?
There needs to be a...
It'd be interesting to hear some feedback from the chat as well about that.
It's entirely possible. I mean, what COVID and response, the global response COVID has demonstrated both at a national, supranational level, is that governments can move quickly if they need to address systemic issues. It's, you know, without wanting to be too controversial, climate is the biggest single material impact that we're facing today. So we should surely have a response that's proportionate to what we're facing. And COVID has demonstrated that it's entirely possible. So what is the response from national governments, private companies? And we've seen the UN already move out on this quite aggressively. You know, let's put conditionality on funding and conditionality behaviours and the real price on pollution and use.
Do you think that's happening in government, Adam?
I think COVID has been a real wake-up call. As I say, we've been doing this green IT malarkey for over 10 years. If you look back, if you're bored or if you have some time, look back at the original strategy, you'll see all these good things about remote working and various other things that have now become absolutely the norm. We've been collecting data on ICT footprint for that entire period. In the last few months during COVID, the amount of directors across public sector that have contacted my group for details of what their IT footprint is has risen rapidly, and also the involvement of county councils and the NHS within my group has also grown as well, because of this recognition that IT is a part of this bigger picture. It's not something that's just happening alongside, it's part of the sustainability model for your sustainability strategy. And, you know, the model should be that you've got an estate, you've got travel, you've got procurement, and you've got IT. And IT's in there as this key enabler to making all of this stuff happen. And unless you think of these things in the same picture in this sustainable business, as some of the comments I've seen have come up here, it all needs to be wrapped up in the same thing. And government, as been noted, is this huge beast. And I've touched on the different owners across it. What's needed for me is a single sustainability vision across government, and there's an awful lot of work to do, and we need to move on it quickly. I do feel that you know, it's been a rapid change in the last 18 months. I've been doing this for a long time, possibly not as long as you three, but it was not sorry, that came out wrong. I've been it wasn't uncommon for me to be kicked out of boardrooms for even talking about green or sustainable because it wasn't seen as relevant. All those doors are open now. People are keen to do this and do the right thing, and things are moving relatively rapidly, but a lot more needs to be done.
Thanks, Adam. That's really encouraging. And it strikes me at Bi-Regional, we're doing a lot of work with local authorities who have declared a climate and ecological emergency, and the government or the Parliament has declared as well as we've got the COP coming up. So it does feel like that's the way in for you procurement people who want to make sure procurement is not just seen as an add-on, but it's a key part of delivery of zero carbon and sustainability. So look out, talking to the right people in the council. Ahead of any policy changes that Adam has flagged that are coming next year, how can buyers embrace change and accelerate the impact without exposing themselves to risk? You have to be careful in procurement. I mean, David, what do you think?
Yeah, there's as all buyers will know, and as long as you follow the sort of treaty principles, equality and fair opportunity, there isn't risk. You need to design it into first of all, to your strategies and planning. So be very clear about what you're trying to achieve. So too often we are seeing sort of Excel spreadsheets with 50 lines of data asking suppliers what will they do for us. What we actually need to is design purpose and focus, whether that's inequality or climate, into our functional plans, and that needs to be translated into the way we buy. So if you want to embed sustainability and outcomes and service levels, then you need to design it into your processes. And then you need to make sure that the supply base is very clear about what you're trying to achieve and what the priorities are. And you're not in breach of any rules. You can define and be very specific about the outcomes and the way you want companies to deliver those services or products. And I'll add one slightly more controversial point: is push the centre. Not necessarily Adam, although he called me old. I'm sure he did call me old. So I
did. I said that more experience.
Not necessarily just Defra, but the Cabinet Office as well, because frankly, we've got Brexit and we can change. We've got an opportunity to change policy and policy focus right now, and we should change that within the complexities of what's happening within government, and it should be a priority. So it gives more flexibility to procurement and to organisations and budget holders to put conditionality in their contracts. And I will say this last thing, because I might not get an opportunity again, is why should we do business with organisations that don't pay taxes, that endorse or utilise modern slavery, or are polluting the planet? I don't think we should. So let's be very clear and open about that from a policy and legislative point of view, and put the onus on the supply base to prove that they are compliant with legislation and with the policies we're trying to deliver.
I mean, I think that requires I'm just thinking what you're saying, it goes back to what people have said in the poll, that they want to know what definitions to put in. And people have also said that how can we trust manufacturers' claims? I mean, I've heard some manufacturers make claims, won't name them, where I was completely bought in to how sustainable they were working. And then I spoke to a Chinese activist who goes into the factories, and he said none of the factories are sustainable. None of the workers have the right conditions, not one. And so it's very hard if you're in procurement and you're over the other side of the planet to know what to choose. So it feels like it needs this joined up approach where we all know who to buy from, what are the alternative business models like remanufacturing. There's also a point in the discussion about remanufacturing, because there's clone products and genuine remanufactured products that are of a certain quality and how to distinguish them. So it seems like there's quite a lot of work to do. There's quite a few points in there sort of coming out from embarrassing Defra audience, but I don't know if anyone can pick up on those points.
I think a really important point here, the people across government departments that I work with that are doing this better than others, the ones that have dedicated resource to being sustainable IT experts, that is not consistent across procurement wherever I look. Whether it's somebody in your architecture team, I mean IT architecture, or your IT strategy team, you need somebody who's dedicated to doing this. Defra have dedicated resource here. MOD, I'm pleased to say, have dedicated resource here. Other departments and agencies are less mature in this model. And unless you've got someone in there whose role it is to, I'm not talking about commercial here, I'm talking about designing your ambitions, linking it with your strategic goals for your organization and your IT strategy, making sure this lines up, and then doing that auditing bit that we've been touching on there, going into the supply chains, holding them to account for what they've said they're going to do, being knowledgeable enough in the first place to ask the right questions so that when you're doing the tendering activities, you can weed out those moonshot ambitions that are never going to be achieved and actually look at stuff that is achievable and deliverable. You need that expertise, and we haven't got that, I don't think, in the IT sector. Green IT was something that had a real movement behind it 10 years ago. There were training programs out there. QA were delivering training specifically for green IT. It is not out there in the DDAT framework across government for sustainability. It doesn't exist. It's something, sustainability is something that's pulled up by the sustainable business teams or wider sustainability expertise that are wrapped up in estates knowledge and all that good stuff. That is useful expertise, but there's a real niche sustainability expertise that needs to be applied here to do all of this stuff, and it's not there. It really isn't there. There's such a gap for training.
Do you see, Adam, sorry, just to cut through that, there's a number of voices in the room, and the sustainability exec will have their agenda. The IT guy, his job is to keep the wheels on the bus, and so long as he does that, he's going to kind of carry on as he was, so to speak. And the C-suite guys, they have their agenda. Do you think there's a way that we can sow sustainability literally into the core of the DNA? Is that the bit that's missing?
I mean, I don't think this is complicated. This is something that was supposedly done over a decade ago in linking this in with departmental or organisational strategies and then feeding that down. You need, I wouldn't say that it's commonplace to have a sustainability board with an IT expert on there with estates. It's still fragmented. These things aren't joined up, so you haven't got that clear vision. And what's really needed is actually a cross-public sector vision of all of this, so we can tie all this stuff up. And when new projects and programs come along, they can look at what else is already out there and link in with that, rather than creating something new and creating more waste in the system. You don't always need a new service or a new something else. You can just bolt on to something. That's where CCS are so powerful, and that's why we're working with them so closely to make all of this stuff happen.
I'd like to add on to Adam's point there a little bit, and there's some really great questions coming through, by the way, around greenwashing and transparency in the supply base. What's really interesting is there is always great practice in government in areas. We lack sharing. Some of it's about resources, some of it's about sharing best practices and making it available. And there's a really great comment about transparency. So once we know there's challenges or issues in the supply base, let's be transparent about that. We know cobalt is a major issue. So we know that in the supply base. We know there's class action lawsuits against major manufacturers. Now, does every buyer in the UK have the same issues and the same facts? And the question is, if part of government knows those facts, why doesn't the rest of the public sector know those facts? And can we make them more broadly available? And can we get some transparency about the conversations and dialogue that we have with multinational companies as government? And I'm sure that dialogue is happening, and then share it and share the plans to address these issues. Because until we know that, we can't make better decisions.
Adam, that's I guess a direct question for you. Government has got a lot of knowledge. Could you share that? Could people feed in their knowledge? People have talked about a national category plan for sustainable IT. You know, what do you think? How can we make this easy for people in procurement who've got to get their head around all these different things that need procuring? We can't all afford to employ a dedicated IT expert because they're just not that big.
Yeah, it's really difficult. All I can say is that the new strategy on September the 10th sets out a lot of this stuff that we're talking about here. There's an ambition within it that we need to talk as one government to all suppliers, SMEs and multinationals on these kinds of topics. And I've also made a commitment in the new strategy that everything we do will be published as open data. So I want to make this stuff open and more transparent. As I said right at the beginning, this is not a single policy area, and I am trying to make that change. But, you know, I'm not a senior senior civil servant. I am doing what I can. I'm trying to drive that agenda. I do firmly believe that this is such an important area. Digital is so integral to the future of humanity that we need to have sustainable ICT as a integrated policy area with a big P that can make changes under a single owner. It's too fragmented and broken. I share all these ambitions, I share these frustrations, and I'm happy to chat with anyone after this about what we can do better. There's so much to do.
I mean, it sounds like the next sessions are going to be very needed. And that we all want to read your strategy when it comes out on September 10th.
No pressure.
David, I've got a reflection on, we also work in the built environment, and some lobbying was done to show how many jobs could be created in retrofitting energy efficiency to homes. And then the government has responded with a not very well thought through voucher scheme where we can all be aware, everyone, you can go and get a voucher to insulate your home and put in measures. And part of that was justified by the jobs that can be created. So I just wonder, David, if you could tell us, I mean, maybe as a group, can this group, or is there an industry group that can make the case to government for the social value, the economic value of, you know, basically creating remanufacturing in the UK at least?
I think that's a great observation. I just want to say my government comments aren't pointed to Adam. Just why I don't think Adam can solve the whole of the entire government policy. So just for clarity, any comments weren't focused at Defra specifically. It's a really interesting point because Canada have initiated a very similar program around insulating and energy efficiency around homes and offices, I understand, and I think if I've read it correctly, that's been supported by the governments and federal governments, state governments in Canada for exactly that purpose, which is environmental and economically driven. The reason we started Contract for Change is because there didn't seem to be a voice, and we've been slightly quiet because of COVID, because frankly it was completely voluntary, and we've been trying to support it with, sort of just in our spare time, and actually the majority of people involved in it were actually forward looking, and that means they would also probably in high demand to deal with the COVID issue. So we're going to relaunch that, and we're going to try and get some more sustained resource to support it. I do think, though, that there needs to be a more formalised framework. It's great that there's voluntary groups, and it's really great that there's lots of pressure, I think, coming from different voluntary sector organisations. I do think, though, this is, and everyone has said it, is such a huge and complex issue. It does need much more coordination and focus and dedicated resource if it's going to deliver within the timeframes we need it to deliver. So it's not, can voluntary groups influence government? Can things happen over a period of time? Absolutely. But it can't happen without orchestration and resource. And the last point is on construction and infrastructure in general. Certainly in terms of economic development and inequality, they have been far more progressive than, for example, the IT sector. And some of that is to do with government policy and local job creation over the last 10 or 15 years. And certainly, if we look at best practices, the construction industry, and I know organisations such as Morgan Sindall, they are very forward-looking in the way they focused on purpose and impact in the way they operate as a company. So there is some good practice there that I think IT services can learn from.
Can I just, something that hasn't come up at all in this chat is the benefits from IT that can come to sustainable outcomes, and that's tied in with the estates points that David was just making. There's an awful lot of projects out there that are looking at things like AI in buildings to control people flow and lights on and off in buildings and all that kind of stuff, and the energy consumed there. What we need is a really good balanced view. Well, obviously we're naturally focusing on procurement in this chat, but we need to, the UN have stated quite categorically the billions and trillions possibly of pounds that can be gained from adopting new tech in terms of sustainable benefits and efficiency savings. What we're talking about here is all the negatives and the inevitable sustainability issues that are going to hit us within a decade or two. So we really need to recognise these two factors and balance them out and have this intelligence in our procurement so that when we're looking at something new, we look at all those positive benefits that could provide and look at all those negatives as well and try and do business with the best, whether they're small, medium or large or whatever, and get that overall outcome aligned to your strategic vision.
Adam, just a quick one for you as well, David. What do you think is the one, for the audience here, what's the one single thing, if they were to start today, they could adopt to kind of get on the path, would you recommend?
John, for me, very practically, from a procurement perspective, I would engage all of my critical suppliers and start to ask questions, obviously in a voluntary sense if it's in the public sector, but in private sector around what are your plans to reduce environmental impact? What are your plans to reduce inequality? Can we work with you to improve and learn and collaborate? Because it impacts everyone. So how do we collaborate effectively and start the dialogue? And as long as everyone can do it voluntarily, you're not breaching any contracts and so on and so forth. There's nothing to stop anyone wanting to positively move out. And that's, if you wait for sourcing opportunity contracts to end, then you could be waiting 4 years or more. So really want to drive change, you've got to engage immediately with your major suppliers.
Yeah, echo that. I just say very simply, I touched on it earlier, link your IT with your wider sustainability strategy, and if you haven't got a sustainability strategy, your organisation or your department or agency strategy, make sure IT is embedded in that, and that you start to link your what your IT is delivering in terms of benefits and also risks and issues with your wider strategy. And there's questions coming in here about funding for those roles. I'd argue we can't afford not to do this. This is absolutely critical to keeping your business going. When I was in defence, I talked about sustaining defence business. It was much easier to talk about this in defence because we were deploying kit on operations that might not be upgradable for years, sometimes decades, because they're out in really difficult to get to places. So you had to think long term, but this is critical for all of us. This stuff is running out, so it's no good saying that we can't afford it. We have to do this.
Yeah, so I mean, that links in with some of the comments in the chat that people feel that they really want to take action on this, but it depends on the size of the organisation. So I think for some local councils where they've had a lot of cutbacks, that idea of a checklist, which came out really strongly in the poll, I feel like this group and the government could maybe help to come up with that, and perhaps we could tie up with other governments, because this is not just a UK issue. We're talking about global supply chains and global impacts and global companies here. So I encourage everyone to, perhaps we can all join in with what the Dutch government are now leading, and I'll send some links through to Matt to send through to everybody on some of the solutions that we identified, which included circular computing. But as we sort of come to the end now, I'd just like to ask you for your call to action, really, for everyone. What do you think we should all do next? Steve's encouraged us all to highlight what one thing could you do, but you know, if you've got any other things to make it easy for everyone to get started on this journey and what can happen next. So David, could you kick us off on that one?
Yeah, I think, again, in terms of one action is collaborate and support the agenda moving forward. There was two good points made in the chat. One is about focus on metrics and measurements. We do need to fundamentally put my personal belief is purpose and climate central to what we do, and to do that we need to get the support of, you know, procurement as a profession, IT as a profession. So actually reaching out and collaborating with people and sharing best practice and basically creating pressure for change. That's the number one thing, because that will lead to change.
Fantastic. And Steve?
I would like to thank you all, but we've had 84 to 100 people in the chat. I personally, we're promoting hard at the moment. I didn't want this to be a salesy kind of environment, which it hasn't been, which is great. If you want to talk specifically about circular computing and remanufactured laptops, we're at Procurex on the 9th. We're teeing up Adams on the 10th. We'll be at Procurex, which is a virtual online. You can come to that, or you can call out to me directly. When we speak to people about what we do about remanufactured laptops, the laptop is part of the conversation, but most likely it's 20% of the conversation. The rest of what we discuss is about the sustainability within IT, and it's the education piece, because at the end of the day, we sell laptops, you buy laptops as a buyer, as a seller, so we're perfectly aligned there. It's just a case of talking you through the how you can work with us, what's in it for you, what's in it for your organisation, and ultimately to try and de-risk your position as a buyer. And that's our job, is to be the glue or the enabler between having an IT strategy that is sustainable and getting into the game immediately.
Okay, and thanks very much, Steve. So do get along to Procurex, everyone. And Adam, final quick word in terms of what you think people could do.
Okay, so I really wanted to talk about the new strategy in a bit more detail. I can't until it's published. All I can say is look out, for those of you in the public sector that are in procurement, look out for changes to the technology code of practice, which is part of the government spend controls process. That applies to all of public sector. You can find that on the gov.uk pages. Sometime in September, I'm confident you will see sustainability in there as a much stronger point that will need to be met in order to get approval for your spend controls for your IT. There will be guidance along with that that's written in the language of DDAT professionals. So we're working really closely to make that happen. For all of you that are in councils or in the wider public sector, if I can do, start at defra.co.uk, gov.uk. Come along and join our group. We've got best practice, we've got gold standards, we've got ITT examples, we've got methods for you to look at the size of your legacy estate and what examples there are and opportunities to move to a greener thing. We've got examples for how to do green procurement with cloud and colos and all the rest of it. So we're a great resource across the public sector. We've already got a number of county councils, and as I say, NHS, Scottish Government, Welsh Government have been involved with us before. So come on board if you're not already there, we can help.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Adam. That's a great resource. And I know also David has a network called Contract for Change as well. So we'll make sure that when we send you the recording, you've got all these links and this information about the next event in this series, which will be after the September the 10th, so you can then discuss the content and what to do next about it. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for your great contributions. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.